Stella was 23 when she married Joseph. He was young, ambitious, and full of fire, preaching with a passion that could make a room feel alive even when it was empty. But at the time, Joseph had almost nothing. No steady income, no real place to live, barely enough to eat. Stella saw his dreams and felt a pull toward him. She admired his energy, his hope, his belief that he could change the world with faith. In the beginning, they lived in a small, run-down apartment, where the ceiling leaked when it rained, and the furniture was secondhand. Stella cooked meals on a tiny gas stove, washed clothes in a small basin, and held the household together, while Joseph stayed up late writing sermons, walking the streets, looking for people to preach to, talking to anyone who would listen. Sometimes, the doors were empty, the chairs bare, and he returned tired, hungry, and frustrated. But he never gave up. Stella stood by him through all of it. She gave him hope when he doubted himself. She reminded him that they were a team, that they would make it. Slowly, Joseph's ministry grew. People began attending his church. Donations came in. By the time they were building multiple churches across the city, Stella had already spent years sacrificing her comfort for his dream. She looked elegant beside him at events, always smiling, always graceful. To outsiders, they were a perfect pair. Joseph, the anointed young pastor, powerful and inspiring. Stella, the loyal, beautiful wife, supportive and refined. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. Joseph was not the man everyone thought he was. He was charming, persuasive, and careful. He could smile and preach about holiness while sneaking texts to vulnerable women in the church, inviting them for counseling or private talks. Some were young choir members. Some were married women looking for guidance, anyone he could manipulate. Stella noticed the signs first. Late nights, lipstick stains, unusual excuses, whispered phone calls. At first, she doubted herself. Maybe she was imagining it. But the evidence piled up. Notes on his phone, messages from women praising him for attention he shouldn't have given, excuses that didn't add up. When she confronted him, he didn't beg. He didn't apologize. He looked at her with that cold, calculating stare and said something that would bind her for years. If you expose me, Stella, everything we built will fall. The church will crumble. The people who depend on us will suffer. And you, do you want to go back to poverty? Do you want everyone to know you stayed with a man who has nothing? I won't fall alone, and I won't let you fall alone either. Stella froze. She remembered the nights she went hungry to feed him, the bills she paid when there was no money, the empty chairs, the long walks home in the dark after preaching in streets that no one cared about. She hated him for what he did. She loathed the lies, the betrayal. But she feared losing everything she had helped him build. The thought of starting over, poor and shamed, made her stomach twist. So she stayed. She stayed quiet, endured the cold dinners, the whispered excuses, the dismissive arrogance. Every time Joseph preached in front of a crowd about purity, Stella's chest ached. She would complain sometimes, subtly, gently even, but Joseph would brush her off with a smirk or a roll of his eyes. Don't start again, Stella. You don't understand ministry. You'll see when you're older. And so, she learned to swallow her pain. She learned to smile at the public while her heart cracked in private. She had a perfect life to the world. But in their home, the walls held tension, bitterness, and lies. Every step she took in their apartment felt heavy with unsaid words. Every conversation, a careful dance. She watched him, loved him, hated him, and feared him all at once. And deep down, she began to realize something dangerous. If Joseph would not feel the consequences of his actions, she would eventually have to make him feel them herself. Time passed, and the cracks in their marriage grew wider. Joseph's public life soared while their private life eroded. Stella could no longer ignore the signs. Every late-night whisper, every unexplained absence, every perfume-scented collar or lipstick-stained nod at her. She confronted him again and again, and each time, he deflected, manipulated, or lied. "I'm preaching to save lives, Stella," he said once, shrugging. "You can't understand the calling." But Stella did understand. She understood every sleepless night, every sacrifice, Every prayer whispered in the dark when there was no one left to believe in them. She understood how it felt to watch the man she loved betray her without remorse. And that understanding burned inside her, turning pain into fire. The arguments became routine. She would glare across the dinner table, voice trembling but firm, demanding answers. He would laugh, roll his eyes, and retreat to his study. She complained to friends. She begged him to change. She tried everything. But Joseph would not listen. He treated her complaints like mosquito bites. Annoying, easily ignored, never dangerous enough to act upon. Every time she saw him smile on the pulpit, quoting scripture about love, faithfulness, or holiness, her stomach twisted. The words he preached, the image he held in public, it all mocked her private suffering. And she realized something terrifying. He had no intention of stopping. Then came the day that broke her completely. She returned home earlier than usual, the sun still low in the sky, when she found him in their bedroom with another woman. Not a text, not a whisper, not a fleeting kiss. Her own home, her own sanctuary, violated. For a moment, she froze, heart hammering in disbelief. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, it all collided at once. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to throw everything she could find at him. But something inside her shifted. She stopped feeling like a victim. She started feeling like someone who could fight back. She realized that if Joseph would not feel the pain he had caused, she would have to make him feel it herself. Not quietly, not in hiding, but deliberately, calculated, so that every moment would sting him as deeply as she had been stung. She thought of every time he had lied to her, cheated, manipulated her loyalty, and used her fear to control her. She remembered every stolen night, every whispered lie, every facade of holiness that covered his sins. And she knew one thing clearly. If he would not be accountable, she would ensure that he tasted the betrayal he had forced her to swallow. And so the fire of revenge began to take root in her heart. It wasn't impulsive or reckless. It was sharp, precise, patient. She would plan. She would wait. And when the moment came, Joseph would know exactly what it felt like to be destroyed by the very person he thought he had controlled. Stella didn't act out of impulse. She planned. She waited. Every day, she observed Joseph. How he walked into the living room smiling at his congregation. How he kissed her cheek in public. How he preached about purity and faith. Every gesture reminded her of the lies he had built his life upon. And every reminder fueled her resolve. Then Samuel entered her life. He was 22, a church assistant who admired her deeply. He was polite, respectful, and always careful to call her mama. He was young, innocent, loyal, and unassuming. A stark contrast to Joseph's arrogance and betrayal. At first, he was just someone to talk to, a shoulder to lean on when the nights felt heavy with anger and sadness. But slowly, Stella realized he could become more than a friend. He could become the instrument of her justice. She tested her plan carefully. Samuel never pushed, never crossed boundaries, but Stella orchestrated their encounters to stir the perfect storm. She guided him, gently, subtly, and soon their closeness shifted, not out of lust alone, but out of purpose, a purpose rooted in teaching Joseph exactly what it felt like to be betrayed. The night she chose to act was deliberate. She invited Samuel into their home, making sure Joseph would arrive at the exact moment. Every detail was precise. The lights dimmed just enough, the air thick with tension, the bed a silent stage for her calculated message. When Joseph opened the door, the sight hit him like a punch. His wife in bed with another person. It hit him harder than he thought. Samuel fled immediately, clothes half adjusted, panic in his eyes. But Stella didn't move. She sat calmly on the bed, eyes locked on her husband. Her expression was serene, almost cruel in its composure, as if to say, "This is what it feels like." Joseph froze. His pride shattered in an instant. Rage, confusion, humiliation, it all collided inside him. How could you do this?" he shouted, voice cracking. "I provide for you. I built this life for us. How could you betray me like this?" Stella's response was quiet, but sharp. "Now you know how it feels." Joseph's eyes widened, disbelief mixing with anger. "No, it's not the same. I'm a man. It's different." Her patience broke in that instant. Her voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "It's not different. We both have hearts. We both feel pain. You hurt me, Joseph. You lied to me, cheated on me, and humiliated me. This is no different." For the first time, Joseph was speechless. He turned away, trying to mask his trembling pride. Every word Stella had spoken was a mirror to his own sins, reflecting the exact pain he had caused her. He stormed out, muttering threats about punishment and revenge. But Stella remained. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She only whispered a warning he could never forget. "Expose me, and we both go down. Don't forget that." Joseph's rage didn't fade with distance. He left their home that night, fists clenched, jaw tight, muttering under his breath about punishment and humiliation. His mind raced, replaying the scene over and over. Stella calm on the bed, Samuel half-dressed, the silent, cutting truth in her eyes. He could not comprehend that the woman he controlled, manipulated, and betrayed had finally turned the tables. The next morning, Joseph sought counsel, but not from Stella. He went to the church elders, men he had trusted to uphold the ministry's reputation. He demanded justice, demanded divorce, demanded that Stella be punished. His voice was sharp, trembling with a mixture of pride and betrayal. "Do you understand what she's done?" he asked, voice tight. "She has humiliated me, publicly, in my own home. She must pay." The elders exchanged glances, uneasy. They were aware of Joseph's past indiscretions, the whispered rumors, the secret affairs, but had never acted. Now, with Stella's act so brazen, they were caught in a moral and social dilemma. "If you expose her, Joseph," one elder warned, "you risk everything you've built. The congregation, the church, the donations, it will crumble. We beg you to reconsider. Don't let your personal pain destroy the ministry." But Joseph could not hear reason. His hurt was raw, his pride wounded beyond repair. He could see nothing but the betrayal, nothing but the humiliation, nothing but the anger that burned in his chest. He left the meeting, eyes cold, mind made up. In the days that followed, the tension in their home was unbearable. Stella felt the weight of his wrath, but she did not retreat. She watched him pace, heard his whispered threats, and sensed the plotting behind every measured action. At the same time, she reflected on the years she had endured, on the sacrifices she had made, the nights she went hungry, the lies she swallowed to protect him and their future. Every moment Joseph spent plotting revenge only strengthened her resolve. They were now locked in a silent war. Stella had taken the first strike, but Joseph would respond. And when he did, it would not be private, because neither could walk away. The web of lies, manipulation, betrayal, and revenge had grown too tight. Both were bound by fear, pride, and the knowledge that exposure could ruin them. But Stella understood one truth clearly. She would not back down. And this time, the stakes were no longer just personal. They were about to engulf the entire church. Sunday arrived, heavy with the usual devotion. The church was full, the air thick with expectancy. Stella sat quietly, her mind still reeling from the week's tension, heart pounding. She had brought Samuel into their home, not to humiliate Joseph publicly, but to teach him a lesson, to make him feel the pain he had caused her, privately, in a way he could never ignore. But Joseph had other plans. He stepped onto the pulpit, his chest rising and falling with forced composure, the smile on his face rigid, rehearsed. Stella expected anger, maybe a brief confrontation at home, nothing more. She did not expect the words he spoke next. He began addressing the congregation, voice tight with faux grief and simmering anger, telling them that Stella had fallen into temptation. He painted himself as the innocent, the betrayed, the man who had suffered silently while his closest companion betrayed him. Shock rippled through the congregation. Gasps, whispers, and stunned faces filled the pews. Women pressed hands to mouths. Men shook their heads. Even the children sensed the tension, unsure of its source. Stella's heart sank. Shame and embarrassment washed over her in waves. Her private lesson had been turned into a public spectacle. She sat frozen at first, the heat of every gaze burning her. She hadn't intended for anyone to see her life exposed like this. But as the murmurs and pointed glances intensified, her resolve sharpened. By the time she got home, the attacks, both from members and online, had become too much. Stella reached for her phone, hands steady despite the storm of emotions, and began releasing everything. Screenshots of Joseph's messages, photos of him with other women, audios of his confessions. The fallout was immediate. Social media erupted. Murmurs of disbelief turned into outrage. Joseph's carefully constructed image of holiness and perfection crumbled under the weight of proof. Some still clung blindly to him, but most recoiled in disgust. How could a man they revered, their shepherd, have lied, cheated, and manipulated for so long? How could Stella, who had seemed perfect, hide it for years, only to finally strike back? The church, once vibrant and thriving, began to collapse. Members left in droves. Donations dried up. Volunteers abandoned projects. The empire they had built together, the life they had shown to the world as perfect, disintegrated under the weight of truth. Stella watched it all unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. She had never wanted this public spectacle, but justice had found its way into the light. Joseph, who once controlled everything, now faced the same humiliation he had inflicted on her: public shame, exposure, and the disgust of those who once worshipped him. Even as the dust settled, one truth remained undeniable: no wealth, power, or reverence could shield a life built on lies. The cracks Joseph ignored for years had grown into a chasm too wide to repair. After the scandal erupted, life as they knew it ended. Joseph's pulpit, once a place of power and admiration, had become a stage of disgrace. People turned away, friends whispered, congregants left in droves. Stella, too, faced the weight of the public eye, embarrassment, pointed fingers, and the judgment of those who once admired her. The divorce followed soon after. It was swift, cold, and inevitable. The legal proceedings were only a formality. The damage had already been done. Their wealth remained intact, but the comfort it could buy was meaningless in the shadow of public shame. Every step outside their homes drew glances, gossip, and judgment. The city knew their story. Everyone knew who they were and what they had done. Joseph, once a revered man of God, became a cautionary tale whispered about in hushed tones. People remembered the sermons, the charisma, the facade, and then the betrayal. Stella, once the admired First Lady, had retaliated in a way that revealed both the truth and her own capacity for vengeance. Neither could ever escape the consequences. The church itself crumbled under the weight of scandal. Projects halted, donations disappeared, and volunteers abandoned their posts. What had been a thriving ministry, admired across the city, disintegrated into ruins. The elders who had tried to prevent public exposure could only watch in helpless dismay. Stella and Joseph retained enough money to live comfortably, but comfort was hollow. The public knew them too intimately, and peace was impossible. They had both learned a bitter truth. When power, love, and loyalty are built on lies, the collapse is inevitable, and it spares no one. In quiet moments, Stella thought of the years she had spent supporting him, of the sacrifices she had made, and of the life they had once imagined together. Joseph, too, had to reckon with the ruin of his carefully curated image, the betrayal of trust, and the loneliness that came from being abandoned by everyone who once revered him. They had won and lost at the same time. Wealth could not buy forgiveness. Respect could not mask betrayal. And the lesson they both learned, painfully, was simple and inescapable. Lies and betrayal are seeds of destruction, and when they bloom, the ruin touches everyone who nurtured them. The world remembered them, not as the powerful couple they pretended to be, but as two people undone by their own sins, and the echoes of their story would follow them forever.